Interchain. Hi, Cosmoverse. I know it's the last track, not the last track, the last talk in this track, so I'm going to go light on you. I'm from engineering from Cardano Foundation, and as you all know, or typically outsiders consider our chain as the notoriously slow one. I'm actually surprised we only got a 50-minute slot. But I also want to be a nice guest and say definitely thank you for having us here. And what I'm going to talk about today is a bit about the why. Why is Cardano actually on stage at Cosmoverse? How does this make sense? How does Cosmos make sense for Cardano at all? And I'm going to talk about a bit the what we have achieved so far, what we still have to solve before we can roll all those things out to mainnet, basically. But let's dive into it. I'm, by the way, pretty happy that our marketing team is not around and does not see my silly slides that I put together here. But the question that we asked ourselves when we invested heavily into adoption during the last 2 years, and we're speaking to a lot of players trying to figure out, okay, how can they apply our tech that we have built, so public permissionless blockchain, which in our case is the Cardano mainnet, or the Cardano blockchain overall. How can we make this fit for their specific requirements? And I guess that I'm not the only one in this room that's very well aware of that traditional business, be it enterprise or be it institutional adoption, has some specific requirements which, let's say, are not that easy to fulfill, at least when you're coming from a decentralization purist perspective, right? So this was the reason why we are, and this is really my profane engineering point of view on this, why we dove into figuring out, okay, what kind of tools are missing for us so that we can satisfy those specific industry requirements. And where we ended up is that we, in that case, were lacking a so-called sidechain SDK. I also want to give some kudos to some other projects in the space, because in the Cardano space, we're not the only ones building interoperability solutions or scalability solutions, if you wish, that's somewhat interrelated. I listed some of them here on this slide. Some of them are still haven't. They're soon to come, maybe not soon to come, maybe a bit later to come. Very interesting projects overall, all with different approaches to how to solve this topic. And some of those projects are even around for a couple of years now, and they started bridging to other ecosystems long before we even thought about it. So that's a shout out to kind of the interop OGs in our space. But question is, how did Cardano end up going ahead with implementing or trying to implement IBC and using the Cosmos SDK? Because, when we figured out, okay, there seems to be that gap that we need a sidechain SDK, Cosmos SDK is not the only one out there, right? The next obvious choice would have been to go with Substrate, maybe use for interconnectivity their XCM stack. But there were some strong selling points when it comes to Cosmos SDK and IBC, which were significantly superior to what we wanted to build. And the one thing is definitely that IBC as a protocol gives the sidechains or the app-specific blockchains that you are building sovereignty. So you don't have to go through a very cumbersome auctioning process to get your chain connected to some main chain or something like that. Of course, that's a trade-off, because then you also lose the capability of inheriting the security from this hopefully super secure mainnet. But it makes your chain very flexible when you're building it and gives you choices. And this was basically what we wanted to leverage, and which made us choose Cosmos SDK on the one hand to build the app chains, and then on the other hand IBC as a messaging protocol, so that we have some means how to communicate between those app-specific, business-specific blockchains with our mainnet. IBC, however, also has a mechanism which is interesting for us again, because you all know the struggle. You bring up your own app chain, you don't have a big set of validators, and you run into some problem in terms of, okay, how secure is actually my tiny application-specific blockchain when it's only run by 5 validators, or make it 20 validators. And maybe even the number of validators is not that important, but it's maybe more the economical power that secures your blockchain, especially in the proof of stake situation, right? And there was, I think the standard is still kind of in the making. I guess it's ICS 28, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's really about how my application-specific blockchain can inherit partially or completely the security of the mainnet, which is important for us because maybe our customers or clients, they want to do their own thing, kind of, on their application-specific blockchain or sidechain, but still they don't want to suffer from the security losses that they have to take. So this was interesting for us as well, and there are different approaches in the space. I mean, you can also look at approaches like AVSs, restaking, where you don't even have just services that are blockchains themselves, but more arbitrary services, which then inherit the kind of economical safety that Ethereum would give you. And Cardano is also shaped in a way with its validator sets and some unique features that we have that we could support an approach like that. And there are even some joint between EigenLayer and Cardano, or IOHK in that case, research activities around how to get something like that done. But however, and it's also pretty much in line with a podcast that I recently heard, I'm not pretty sure how many friends the person on the podcast made actually, but it had the catchy title, Is Cosmos Dead? Which made me at least listen to it. But the key takeaway of it is definitely Cosmos is not dead. And IBC, and specifically the Cosmos SDK or Interchain SDK, stay strong. And when you start working with those toolings to bring up your own app chain, to modify it according to your needs, and you use all those tools that were presented by the speakers before it, you really figure out, okay, why Cosmos makes sense. Definitely for us. If I could make a wish, I would definitely say, okay, we now got IBC. It's a very pragmatic standard. You can call it the TCP/IP whatsoever of blockchain tech. You really see it, how the message passing is structured, that it's very inspired by those traditional network technology approaches. Also, its security model is pretty straightforward to understand, not that straightforward or simple to implement, especially for a Nakamoto-style consensus chain like Cardano is. But if I could make a wishes, and maybe the pragmatists in the room hate me for it, but please take IBC a step further when it comes to standardization. Maybe approach IETF, not sure if there are any such activities already happening, but maybe make it an IETF standard, because the guys at IETF, if you look at their blockchain standardization, are mostly focusing, at least when you look at their output, on how to standardize safe asset transfer, which is nice, and maybe one of the more important topics in the space. But if you then again look at IBC and what you can do with IBC, it does definitely not capture the whole range of possibilities that you have. So what we kicked off the project like 10 months ago. You can see everything in the public right from the beginning. We called it the IBC incubator because when we started off, we weren't pretty sure if we were able to figure out all the different challenges that we were facing. And you can believe me, it really took a good, kind of a faith of leap to go ahead and try to figure out how to implement specifically a light client for our Ouroboros consensus algorithm. What we achieved so far, and you can see it in those GitHub repositories, is on the one hand, we implemented a Tendermint light client running on Cardano. We're using our own smart contract platform for it. That's called Aiken. Pretty nice when it comes to developer experience. One of the fewer tools in our space, I have to admit. We implemented 2 different light clients for Cardano. The first one, and that was really maybe the biggest challenge, is Cardano is not a BFT, does not use a BFT consensus, right? So I don't have fast settlements. I also don't have super nice proofs of the state of the network. So we had to work around this a bit, and we did a first approach developing a light client that was basically using a notary scheme, so not super exciting from a decentralization point of view, because you needed someone that attests you that what's happening on Cardano is really what is happening on Cardano, and it's not just what one of the relayers is claiming while transmitting some messages over to your Cosmos chain. But we went one step further and we're using a technology called Mithril, which in the beginning was actually just designed to be a stake-based multi-threshold scheme, which allows network operators to more easily and quicker bootstrap Cardano nodes. But the team developed this software into a direction that we now almost got something that looks very familiar if you're aware of approaches like AVSs, restaking, or maybe you can even consider it a very limited prover marketplace. So what it gives me is basically proofs, state proofs of Cardano, and it secures those state proofs with a part of the stake that also secures the Cardano mainnet. And by that, I get this decentralization component in it and a more, basically a better light client, right? Because I mean, also heard this recently from someone from the Cosmos space. Everyone can design a light client, but the question is, how secure is this light client really? And how decentralized is it? Or if you look at censorship resistance, those are all challenges that might then be harder to solve after you have solved those very first challenges. Next thing is, I'm gonna give a talk tomorrow at the Cardano Summit. It's starting tomorrow and goes until there I'm gonna have an hour and will elaborate in more detail about what we have actually built, also with whom we have collaborated, what the next steps are, what needs to happen. So all the nitty-gritty details. Another thing is, we also developed a nice use case basically using Cosmos SDK. And this was quite a pleasant experience because it's with the tooling that you have, it's super easy to bring up your own application-specific blockchain. You can find this in the other GitHub repository that's in there. It basically implements a simple traceability use case where we're fetching data from an API, which provides you with data about chips. We do a kind of decentralized Oracle thingy, figuring out, okay, are there any outliers in the data that's reported? We do this all on Cosmos. And once the data reports have been consolidated, we submit this over to the Cardano mainnet so that then a Cardano smart contract could pick it up, do something with it, and send in via IBC a message back. So, as you might have heard, the reason why we started with this activity is actually pretty selfish, right? So we just needed a building block. As an engineer, just needed a building block to find more adoption for Cardano. I wasn't looking specifically in the Cosmos space because I wanted to also give Cosmos a push so that they get more adoption. But then we figured something out, and that was a very, very pleasant experience, is once we made this public, and we started to engage with the Cosmos community or the Interchain community, it was actually a super welcoming experience. And we have worked with some of those projects or just talked to those projects, and they all were very welcoming and opening and offering support so that we get our stuff done, if you wish, so that we are able to join the Cosmoverse. The Cosmoverse, no, that's the conference, the Interchain. So I'd like to say thank you to all those projects. It's lots of kudos go into this direction. The Interchain Foundation talks with Osmosis. We already were talking to, because that's one of the next biggest building blocks that we have to fulfill before we roll this out, spoken to auditing companies, because I mean, we're talking in the end about that we are trying to exchange financial assets via those interconnectivity features that we are building. So we better have a good security audit in place, besides having a good design. That's already the end of my presentation. There's just one statement that I want to make, and maybe I mess up my whole presentation with this one. But, especially for some of the tech that the Cardano people are building at IOHK, at Cardano Foundation, at one of the community teams, I always find sentences and statements in the media where if we're going to have this, just an example, there's going to be a scalability technology on Cardano called Leos, and then there are statements around like, if we're going to get this, we will be faster than Solana. if we're gonna have this, we will be more secure than X or something like that. And it really annoys me, and maybe I'm the boomer on the stage here, coming from traditional business, because I think that's not how adoption is going to work if we in the public always speak bad about the other protocols, just talking about what our strengths are, but I never read any news like, and that's really what I'm hoping for in the future, that, for example, Cosmos and Solana pitch together to back up the health insurance system at a nation state. And just because they combined the unique features of those protocols, they were able to get this done, because this also created trust. There are tons of other examples which I could bring up where this might make sense. But I'm going to stop here because, like said, it's the last talk in this session, and I'm pretty sure everyone is looking forward to the next track. So thank you very much, and see you around.